little queer internet people, and welcome to our first ever episode of the Queer Adulting Podcast, where the queer elders will tell you about the mistakes that we made so you don't have to make the same ones. I'm your host, adamk, they, them. I'm an adult advisor at NAGLY, the North Shore Alliance of LGBTQIA plus youth. And for our first episode, I'm sitting down with the program director and technically my boss, Tony Leone. Hi, Tony.
Hi, everyone.
So please, Tony, introduce yourself a little bit more than I have. Anything that you want to say about who you are?
Sure. So being Adam's technical boss,
yes.
My name is Tony. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm the program director at NAGLY, which is the North Shore Alliance of LGBTQIA plus youth.
And I say technically my boss because do I have to see you as an authority figure? I see you as like an equal.
Yeah.
And then you're like, technically, I am your boss. I was like, okay, so you are technically my boss. And now I will not ever call him my boss.
Which is fine.
Yeah. Which is like, I will say I treat you with a lot more respect than I do my like real boss.
Well,
so,
thank you.
You got that going for you.
That's something.
My real boss will never listen to this, so it's fine if I say
Good.
this. Okay, so as we ask on every episode of this podcast to all the young adults, all the young queer adults out there, what advice would you have given yourself as a queer young adult that is just starting out in this heteronormative world?
Yeah, stay motivated. I would say stay consistent, but also hone into your intentions of what you want for your adult life to be. Kind of manifest what that might look like for you. Taking time to be one with yourself, but also take time to kind of live in the moment. I think a lot of us get stuck with what our expectations look like when we're adults, but really just take time to be yourself as a young adolescent, as a teen, growing up in this kind of confusing world.
Yeah, I think there is this sense of, I'm an adult now, I have to do adult things. And whether or not you actually have to or not is not really what's considered a lot of the time. Do you have an example? Can you tell either like a time where maybe you tried to grow up a little faster than you wanted to, or you've worked with a lot of this youth anytime you've seen it yourself?
Yeah, I mean, personally, that's numerous times. I think I've tried to do that. So in my late teens, early 20s, I was a supervisor at a restaurant, and I tried really hard to kind of dive into my sexuality, I think, a little bit more. And I found it really challenging because I think I pushed myself a little bit too far too quickly. And I think that's what a lot of our young queer youth kind of face, is that they maybe try to push themselves a little bit too far outside that comfort zone, which we call a danger zone.
Right.
And we want to just be mindful of that. Just take each day by day and do what you can to live your true authentic self.
Yeah. I 100% agree with that. I came out when I was quite young. I was 12, and I remember for a long time just making that my entire personality and diving into like, this is who I am. Yeah. And I mean, every person forever finds that thing, finds that identity, and is like, this is who I am now, and they continue with that, and they kind of balance out over time. So like, what's some advice that you would give around like, so you've found this new identity, you've discovered who you are, and you don't really know what to do with it from there. Now you know you're gay, you're queer, you're trans, you're non-binary, you're asexual, any of these different things. You're like, now what?
Yeah, find a sense of connection, find a sense of support. Not to plug NAGLY too much, but find a sense of community, right? Come by NAGLY, talk to other queer LGBTQIA plus adolescents and youth that might have shared lived experience, or adults, right, that have gone through that process in one way or the other. So finding a sense of community, I think, is really, really important, and something that we try to instill in our youth constantly.
Yeah. And you can plug NAGLY.
I know.
It is the NAGLY Queer Adulting Podcast.
That is true.
We're gonna, for every single episode, the name NAGLY is gonna be used plenty.
Good.
So, but this is obviously for the youth ages 18 to 23. Technically, by nonprofit standards, that's considered a youth. So if you're upset that I called you a youth, it's technical. I know that you're a young adult. It's fine. You're a big grown person.
Exactly.
Good for you.
Exactly.
So finding kind of like the first step is to kind of find your tribe, right? Like how, and I think that is probably the hardest step to take. I know for me, it took I came out when I was 12. It took, I'm not going to say my age. You can just assume I'm very young. But it took me quite a while, over a decade, I would say. Somewhere between 1 decade and 2 decades. You do the math from there. To find a community, to find a tribe, and it was really hard. What are no matter where you are, kind of what are some examples or some ideas of all right, I want to find other people, which I think a lot of young people want when they first kind of discover an identity is let me find the other people that I can share this with and will understand it and maybe have some lived experience. What are...
Yeah, I think going off of the opposite of sometimes people find connections that might not be super healthy, right? So we have to be mindful of going online, right? Finding those Discord channels that you might not know the other person that's on that other end. So really being mindful of how far we go with that and find safe and healthy connections. So, coming to community-based centers, talking to people at school, going to your college's GSA if you are at college or a higher level of education. But, really talk to peers, talk to your friends, talk to other people who might have that shared experience who you might not know have that shared experience. At NAGLY, we hold space for allies, right? So we have allies coming into the space, and I think that's really important because our youth/young adults get to kind of commingle with allies who support them unconditionally and their friends who can come into this space. So finding people and connections and support who might not be within the community as well, I think is also crucial to development and to be able to have successful experiences as a young queer adult. I mean, when we turn 18, right, sometimes we're expected to just, okay, you're on your own, but how do we do that when we have so many different aspects of our life, our identity, our sexuality? It's tricky.
Yeah. And regardless of your age, you cannot live in this world alone. No. This is why societies exist, is because it's just not... I remember saying this a lot in high school, or I needed to adapt to survive. I needed to, and in some of those cases, that meant kind of not being my true authentic self because sometimes that's what you have to do.
Sure.
In those cases, I leaned on allies a lot. There weren't a lot of other queer people. I was very much tokenized, and I had to dive into that because it was either that or I was going to be alone, and I was going to be isolated, and God knows that you just can't survive like that. So it was kind of, that's the best of a bad situation is sometimes you do, if all you have around you are allies, rely on your allies if you don't have that exact community until you find it. I kind of want to go back a little bit to what you said about maybe in your search for community, you end up down the wrong path. Because I wouldn't say it was the wrong path. It just certainly wasn't the most healthy for me. It was, I mean, until about college, I didn't know enough other queer people, and especially the few that I did know, I didn't necessarily like or want to be around. So we always had that shared mutual respect, but it didn't mean I want to hang out with them and talk.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I get to college and I still kind of am struggling to find that community. Just the college I went to isn't really known for being a gay mecca. And so where does a young adult turn to is, the internet. And most of the gay people that I met were on Grindr. And that's not necessarily they're not looking to mentor you. No. They're not in the way that I wanted.
Exactly.
They're looking for something very specific.
Yes.
So what are some advice or what are some red flags of you're looking for community? Maybe this community is, again, the best of a bad situation, but how do you know you deserve better?
Yeah, I mean, just from my lived experience from being very closeted up until I think age 21 was when I fully came out of the closet. Before that I was very quote unquote, I'm doing air quotes if, people can't see me, but, very quote straight, right? Straight acting, straight passing. I have a lot of privilege, right? I'm a white male in a middle class community, right? Yeah. So I knew that there was this deep, dark secret that I was holding and hiding, but I knew that I could pass very well and not be kind of caught, quote unquote. So for me, I did dive down that rabbit hole of going online and finding these different chat rooms. And, you know, back in our day, right, or my day, sorry, we had different types of chat rooms that weren't super safe,
right?
And being kind of mentored not in a good way, right, by maybe older individuals. We didn't know who was on the other end of that computer. So I think just being really, really hesitant and mindful of going down that deep rabbit hole. So I think finding a sense of community and connection in person, I think, is so crucial. I know right now in 2025, you know, social media is at an all-time high, Discord, Blue Sky, all of these different platforms that are just evolving. But, you know, really take time and remove yourself from that social media and that technology component and go out and find connections, find that support, go to a gaming group or go to the, you know, different areas in Beverly and Salem and the North Shore and meet other people, right, in a safe environment.
Yeah. I 100% agree with that. I think my life certainly changed when I was like, what if I talked to queer people in person and not just, it is vulnerable.
Yeah.
It is because there is this kind of media representation of queer people and especially like gay men. I grew up the majority of my life identifying as a gay man and every kind of media representation was like, I need to go to a club and dance where everybody is skinny and or very fit and white and can wear these like very revealing outfits, which like go off. I like love it. I've been in that scene as well. But I did not feel I was like that. They will never accept me there. And that's not necessarily the case everywhere. Maybe, I don't know, like maybe in certain areas, probably is exactly that. I'm not going to be going to any white parties anytime soon. But I mean, you can like, eventually I did like try to, I was like, what if I just like go and talk to another queer person? And it didn't have to be for any kind of connection. It was like, I'll talk to that lesbian over there because she seems really cool. And and you can have a great conversation. Just be like, this is somebody that like I can connect with. And like, you know, it's still like, I remember getting her number and being like, that's so cool that like if I ever need help with something, she's there.
Definitely.
I do want to bring up because you said like that you're not our time. But I mean, so you're like what, 6 months older than me, and I will never let you forget any minute of it. I just want to make it clear that Tony and I actually are the same age right now, and we are, but you know, it's part of the queer culture that I gotta take you down a peg.
To roast each other.
Yes,
okay.
I am one of your biggest supporters, but probably your biggest bully as well.
Okay. It's all right.
Cool. Yeah. So tell me about like you came out at 21. You came like that prime age. Can you give me a little bit about what led up to that? Like why, if you knew any earlier, if like, I think there's the like the time that you accept it yourself and then the time that you come out. For me, that was maybe a day, but I was younger and I couldn't keep a secret for the life of me. And also I've acted like this since I was 2 years old. So like there's only so much I can do.
Of course.
But like, so what were those timelines and then why that moment?
Sure. So it was almost a decade, I think, when I finally, came to that realization. I think I was like 12, maybe 13. And I knew that something was different. I knew that something was off. So I was like, well, this is strange. Like I have these feelings. I was like, oh, maybe other people have these feelings too. And, you know, I didn't grow up with siblings, right? Only child. So it's not like I could pass that off to a sibling or a brother or sister or whatever. So I was like, okay, well, something's different. Something's going on here. And I think it was like 15, 16 where I started to really understand like, okay, you know, this is me. This is who I am. But definitely was not ready to talk to anybody about it or vent or find a sense of community because I wasn't able to be comfortable with myself quite yet.
Right.
So I think it was 18 or 19 was when I was really like, all right, I just got to do this. I have to tell my friends. I have to talk to my friends and find that sense of community. And, you know, I lost a couple friends because of it, right? Because I wasn't with healthy groups of people. I had friends in high school. I had friends in middle school. That wasn't the issue, but I had a lot of that toxic masculinity with my friend group because I was so passing and so straight, quote unquote, that I kind of wanted to hide that as deeply as I possibly could. So about 21 was when I was like, no, I'm just doing it. I'm going for it. And I think I made like a Facebook post or something like that. And I was like, you know what, I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to close my Facebook. Like that was, that was the old Facebook. So it was a little bit different at that time. But, and I was like, yeah, I'm just going to talk to my friends, let them know, give them a heads up. And it's been support constantly from then on. But, I've been experimented a little bit with like my expression, like still, I still identify as a male. I still use he, him, his pronouns, but I like to express myself a little bit more kind of fluid with the way that I dress. And that's been kind of a newer thing that I've been kind of experimenting with, I guess, a tiny bit. So.
Which, no, I mean, I've noticed it since I first met you like 2 years ago, even to now. Like you've kind of been able to dress just like, I say that you're moving towards, and I mean this with all the love in the world, but it's going to sound as shady as fuck.
I figured.
But you're starting to dress like a crystal woman who has beat a coke addiction.
Oh wow! Okay.
Just mostly
so
your pants.
Yeah.
I
so
like.
descriptive.
It's the like the flowy pants. It's the very like it very zen. Very like I need to put all of my energy into being peaceful because, and that's not who you are, obviously. But that you're taking on that aesthetic, and honestly, I'm here for it.
Oh, thank you.
I do. I mean, that's a good bit of advice for young queer people. Is like you don't stop kind of discovering who you are. I mean, I know myself. Like, there's been a lot of like how I express myself.
Sure.
For like a year, I was starting to dress femme a lot more until I started drag, and then that kind of scratched the itch of like I want to present femme more. I want to like feel that way. So now, like I kind of went in a very extreme direction where it's like very femme and painful at the same time for hours on end that I'm like, you know what? I am totally fine with wearing sweatpants and or like just like regular anything that's comfortable when I'm out of drag now, just because I'm like, gosh, I'm very uncomfortable for like 10 hours in drag. But yeah, you don't ever stop. And it's okay to keep going. It's okay to keep finding maybe a new color that you want to wear, a new style that you want to wear.
Yeah, new pair of flowy pants.
Yes, a new pair of flowy pants that, give off a certain vibe.
Exactly.
Couldn't describe it very clearly myself.
It's okay.
So I kind of wanted the like post coming out for you, and you said like very supportive. I actually want to talk a little bit about that coming out process because you did it very similar to me when I came out as non-binary. Was I throw a Facebook post out there and just let it go. What are your thoughts on the coming out process in and of itself? It's like a big topic. Like, what do you think?
It's so individualistic. I mean, everyone comes out in a different way. I think I have a hard time with the coming out process because I think society has made it so theatrical, where it's like you have to have this whole party. I always bring this back to Love, Simon. I know it's a challenging film. I get that. But I come back to that scene where he's coming out of the campus and the flags are all... And it's like, oh, yay, I'm coming. Fine. Yeah. But, like, it doesn't have to be that. Like... Just because we're coming out, you don't have to come out as straight, right? Like, why is that? That's the default. So I think coming out is so individualistic, but I would give the best advice of to not put pressure on yourself to make it such a big event, right? Is just, if you want to just put a post out there, if you want to say, oh yeah, cool, like I'm non-binary now, like that's great. Like just keep it short, sweet. You don't have to go into this big theatrical moment because that puts a lot of pressure on yourself, but also pressure on others to figure out what that's going to look like. So, yeah, I wouldn't make it a big theatrical performance unless you really, really feel like this is a life-changing moment.
Right.
Which in that part, embrace yourself. Go to town. Throw a party. But it's setting those high expectations that I think can be a little bit dangerous.
Yeah, it is. First of all, I'm just gonna put it out there. I hated Love, Simon.
I know.
Everyone pressured me to watch it because I just watching the trailer for it. I was like, this looks bad. I was like, this looks pretty bad.
Yeah, it wasn't great.
And every one person that I dated once, and a lot of straight people are just like, it's so it really spoke to me. Yes. And for years I was like, I just feel like I'm gonna get mad. And then I watched it and I was like, yeah, this was worse than I thought it would be. Yep. I agree. Like I don't. The coming out process for anyone is laborious. It is emotionally laborious. It is exhausting to have. Like, and here's the thing with many queer people, you don't ever stop coming out, and it's again, you don't have to do that if you're straight. Like you don't have to come out, which is why like my wish for the world is that like no one assumes anything. Like, why do you need to know? Like, tell me, like, why is it important that you know who I'm attracted to? If you want to know, like, if I'm dating somebody, first of all, like, I'll tell you. Like,
exactly.
You don't need to ask about my love life. I will tell you if it's important. But if you're just like, you know, are you dating anyone? Are you seeing anyone? Like, these are perfectly wonderful gender neutral words that you can use. But also, like, even like, I think as far as gender, I think that's important maybe with your healthcare provider, depending on the situation, not all the times. Or just like, I don't think we should assume anything. I think we should always be giving our pronouns as often as possible.
I agree.
It's a huge cultural shift that needs to happen. And I'm like, there's like a chance that I can see it in my lifetime, but I am a queer elder now, so I've only got like 5 more minutes left.
We're on the same boat.
Yeah, listen. I mean, old is the goal. Like, we want to see more older queer people, obviously, and like hopefully we keep doing the work.
For sure.
But yeah, I don't. It's exhausting.
It is.
And like, you know, that was something that you had done a training with my company actually, about kind of like what it is to be a queer person in the workplace where you don't know if it's safe, and also like there is so much politics attached to identity now that like, if your boss doesn't agree with who you are, that's really hard to deal with. And like, a lot of companies still don't really know how to deal with that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a big shift in society in some components, right? Like, I mean, you made a really good point of saying partner, right? Or who you're with, or, you know, identifying that, oh, yeah, you know, I'm in a relationship, right? But we don't have to make those assumptions. And I think that's so crucial, and I think that's where we're moving in the right direction. I know a lot of allies who still just use the word partner, and it's like sometimes our internal bias says, ooh, I wonder who that partner is, right? But like, in reality, it doesn't matter, right? Because we don't have to make that assumption, right? We have to pull ourselves back from making those assumptions.
Yeah, I think that is the goal. Is like, we don't assume anything. We let people come to us as they are when they figure it out. And I think that people have a hard time with like, but how do I do anything without those assumptions? It's like, I don't know, like, if you really think about it, or like, I think I had this conversation, I forget who it was with, but I was talking about like my nephew, who at the time was like 3. They're like, why would we assume it? Like, we don't have, first of all, like, I don't know that 3-year-olds have romantic or sexual attraction yet. I don't think they do, and I don't want to think about it. But like, I was like, why does it matter? Like, why do we need to know that about a 3-year-old? Why do we have to assign this to children, much less anybody else? And you're just like, oh, like, what? Like, I think what they said, like, oh, I just want to know, like, if they have a little girlfriend or a little boyfriend. And I'm just like,
why does it matter?
Why does it?
Yeah.
I was like, it's 3.
Exactly.
Like,
let them live their life.
I was like, don't ask people about their love life. Just don't. Like, that's something that we need to normalize, not just for queer people, but for anybody who has ever been single or like going through a breakup or going through a rough like love life. Just stop asking. Like,
across the board. Just, you know.
I'll tell you if it's important, or if I want to talk about it.
Exactly.
Especially for queer people, though. Like, everything that we like, I find that a lot of the advice we give is like, I mean, a cis straight person can take this advice too, but like, everything is a little bit more heightened when you're a part of a minority group. Of course, like, there's just this added societal pressure. Okay, let's talk. I kind of want to talk a little bit about like, you being somebody who was pretty closeted for quite a long time, and to being the program director of a queer youth nonprofit drop-in center. Like, what was that transition to saying, like, this is what I want to do? Yeah,
when I made that jump, I jumped, right? Yeah. So I made that jump, and at the time I was in my undergrad program at Salem State, and I was like, all right, you know, I'm starting to come out to everyone. I'm starting to look for a sense of community. And at that time, I knew I was older, but I was honestly trying to find that sense of community. So I found NAGLY, and I was like, oh wow, I'm gonna reach out to the executive director, Steve Harrington, at the time, who was a mentor to me in so many different ways of being able to be where I'm at today in life, but also professionally. And I reached out to him and I said, hey, I see that you're looking for volunteers, some internship opportunities. I'm looking for an internship. I'd love to get involved with NAGLY. And he was pretty blunt coming back saying, like, listen, I told him a little bit of my story, and he's like, why don't you just come by and we'll figure out if we can start the volunteer process. We don't have any paid employees at this time, but, let's see what we can do.
Right.
And fast forward about 7-8 years later, I've just kind of worked my way. I stayed completely motivated because I think I knew where I came from when it came to, being closeted. I was like, I just want to make sure that all of our youth that we serve that walk through that door have that love and continuous support, right? To make sure that they don't have to go through that process of feeling isolated and alone and hiding that quote unquote dirty little secret, right, that they were having. So.
And I mean, I can speak for myself as an adult advisor and pretty much for anybody that has said that they want to volunteer. I think that is the motivation is like, I just don't want people to have to go through what and this is why this podcast exists.
Exactly.
Don't make the same mistakes that we did. Don't have necessarily all the same experiences that we did. Yes. So the youth that we're seeing today, it has been a year or two since we were their age.
Yep.
Give or take a decade. What are they're not necessarily having all of the we do see some people who are saying the same things that we saw when we were in high school, but it's not the same. Things have changed. We have, in a good way, societally shifted.
Sure.
And something's not 100% there. So in your experience of from where you were to where we are now and actually working with these youth, what are some of the new challenges that we're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've built, right? We've built up. So I know when I first came out, only a couple of years ago, of course, right?
Yep.
When I first came out, it was so different, right? It was being gay, bi, a lesbian, that sexual orientation aspect was kind of at the forefront, right? And trans non-binary people, that was such a big deal, right? Because that's where that transition. Obviously, they've always been there. We've always had that queer love, but
societally,
exactly, there was still that work to be done. And I think going back 10 years, right? Essentially, it's been one of those things where we've seen that societal shift where the sexual orientation aspect has been kind of put on the back burner, and it's more of that gender identity component, which I think is important. I think we need to focus on that. That's totally understandable. So I think a shift in trans, non-binary, gender non-conforming is now at the forefront. And I think that's where we're seeing a lot of our youth that are struggling because they're trying to figure out who they are and, unfortunately, what label they fall under, which I don't like labels. I don't love labels, but I also see why youth are trying to fit those boxes because that's still where society is at.
Right.
So I'd love to get to a point, like we mentioned before, about making assumptions where we don't even have to worry about those boxes anymore.
Yeah.
But I think right now in society in 2025, we still have those, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And a lot of our youth are struggling to fit whatever those look like.
Yeah. And it's hard because, it's so the queer spectrum is quite that. It is a large, big, beautiful of many colors, and I think I kind of think of it we can't imagine a new color.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that there are colors in the queer spectrum that we haven't put a name yet, or that. It's just so it is so hard.
It's beautiful.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And what's hard is we as people, we in a society, language is really important, and we want to be able to just quickly and concisely convey information.
Yep.
So we come up with words to describe what it is that we are. And the problem with that is that those words end up having rigid definitions. And that means that people then have to well, I think I'm in this box. And I fit maybe I feel like I fit 75% of that definition, but maybe I need to go a little bit harder into that to fit 100%. Which, again, that's where it gets really confusing. Yeah. And I think that we do need to kind of work towards I wouldn't say labels, but language is important. And being able to concisely describe who you are in a way that doesn't feel laborious is important.
I agree.
But it's okay to say if a word doesn't fit you yet, or you haven't, maybe that word doesn't exist yet, you can make it up for yourself. Like, that's the beauty of human language and people. Yeah. People are complex, and there's not always going to, our language changes every day. Yep. Every year there's new words being added to the English language and the dictionary. So that's another one of like, you don't have to necessarily fit into a queer box and all the stereotypes that therein come. And you can say like, I'm like mostly this. Yeah. And also to know that like all of these things aren't a monolith.
Exactly. Like, and play around with it. Yeah. Right? I mean, when we talk about youth, I know you mentioned earlier in the podcast that, we go up to age 23, but folk, it's continued, right? Yeah. I mean, I'm 31 now, right? And I'm still playing around with it every so often.
Oh my God, you're 31.
I know.
That's
it's crazy.
Insane.
I'm like, way younger.
Yeah.
So play around with it, right? I mean, there's no right or wrong time to experiment and play around. So I think that's really important and crucial.
Yeah. Keep discovering yourself. Yeah. Keep feeling free to just be like, I don't know, that didn't feel right or it did. Or like, I kind of liked that. Yeah. And play around with it. And then if you don't really have a word for it, like, again, sometimes it's okay to just like, what is the lowest common denominator? Like, the closest thing I am is a lesbian.
Exactly.
But like, that's not 100% of who I am. And also like, and you'll like the idea of like, a lot of one of the struggles that I hear a lot is like not feeling trans enough. That is like there's again being trans is not a monolith either, or trans people aren't a monolith. So there are a lot of different kind of ways of expressing your transness, and regardless of if you're passing or if you're doing certain things, if you choose to go the medical route, like none of that matters at the end of the day if as long as you kind of fit the basic definition of my gender does not match the sex assigned at birth.
Exactly.
Like you are. You don't need to go any further than that, and whatever that looks like, that's what it looks like to you.
Wherever you are, you're always enough, right?
Yes.
I think that's so important.
Yeah. I think that's a really good like kind of place to land is wherever you are. That's enough, and whoever that is, that is always enough. And I thank you so much for that. I want to thank you, Tony, for your insights on this. I know I don't say this enough because I have to constantly bully you, but thank you for not just being on the podcast, but what you do for our community, the youth, everyone around you. There's not a person that I've met who knows you who hasn't been like, oh, I love Tony.
Aww.
I'm just like, I do too, but I'm never gonna admit that. So
That's
here
okay.
I am. I can do this once.
You're live. This is great.
It's not live.
I know. Well, whatever.
But on a podcast that people will listen to.
There we go.
And now I will never, if people ever ask me if I said that, I was like, you don't have proof of that. I don't.
That's true.
That's AI, whatever.
Yeah.
I also want to thank Randall, our producer here at Peabody Access TV, and NAGLY as a whole for allowing us to do this. For those of you that don't know, there is this is the Queer Adulting Podcast, but there is actually a queer adulting support group that we have at NAGLY. This is kind of what this is the birth child of that group. I got started with about a year and a half ago because I went into one and I just didn't feel like it was being run well for that age group, and I was like, do you mind if I just like step in here and see if I could help? And it's kind of like the thing I'm most passionate about now. And I'm glad that we get to have a podcast for it. But if you are between the ages of 18 and 23, if you live in the North Shore area, maybe if you're visiting, people visit Salem a lot for some reason. I don't know why.
Yeah, right.
But even if you're visiting and you kind of want to be a part of this conversation, you want to join other queer youth, you want to be a part of some of these topics, feel free to reach out. You can find more information about queer adulting and NAGLY at the website at NAGLY, NAGLY.org. If you have questions specifically about queer adulting, you can email me at adamk@nagly.org. Again, that's adamk@nagly.org. And if you want to get involved with NAGLY, donate money, clothing, time, resources, anything that you think kids would need in this time, this, going into 2025, a tumultuous time. please visit our website. You can also email Tony. I'm just going to give your email out because everybody and their mother has it already.
Oh, yeah.
It's tony@nagly.org. Super easy.
Right.
Tony, Tony@nagly.org. Thank you for listening, and remember, keep it queer.